This is Continuum Drag, a weekly podcast where we watch sci-fi, fantasy, and everything in between.
This week, Sliders, Season 3, Episodes 2 and 4.
Your heat imprint is on the left. Mallory's is on the right.
My God. He's me.
Welcome to Continuum Drag, the podcast with daddy issues. I'm Luke, here with my co-host Jordan. What's real, Jordan?
What's real is I'm desperate to be someone's shower fantasy. Remember that line?
Isn't that just what you always say?
I do say. I start all the
every
podcasts.
episode.
Every episode I start it that way. I'm like, please let me be someone's shower fantasy.
Somebody. Well, Jordan, we're entering the third season of Sliders in our best of run. Can you believe we made it to Season 3 already?
You know what I have to say? When I was watching these fantastic episodes, I was thinking, this speed run, it seems almost perfectly designed for Sliders.
You think so?
Yeah, I think it gives a good snapshot of like someone accidentally coming across this show and they can't find the remote, so they're forced to watch it. But like no one would actually like do this on purpose. So you like accidentally see episodes and you're like, this show's still in the air 4 years later? That's the feeling I get.
So you're imagining a guy who's at home and once or three times a year he loses his remote and it's always Sliders.
Yeah. Well, yeah, 3 times a year in the course of 5 years, which is pretty good.
Well, for these 2 episodes, we are joined by a guest this week. We're welcoming back returning guest Dave. Dave, thanks for being here.
Good evening.
So, what were you here for last? I was trying to remember before we started. Do you remember what you recorded last with us?
Oh, I can't remember the name of it. It was a Roddenberry TV movie from the 70s that was was it John Hurt? And it was like a supernatural thing.
It was a little erotic, right?
The demon one.
Yes, it was erotic. But I don't remember the name. Do you?
I want to say Spectre.
Yeah, it was Spectre.
Oh, it was
That's
Spectre.
Right.
Yeah. It had a lizard at the end.
Yeah, I didn't care for it.
Well, before we get into this week's Sliders episodes, Dave, do you have a history of Sliders? Did you watch it when it was on the air originally?
Yeah, I did. I think I probably only watched, like most people, the first year or two before like big cast changes started happening. But I definitely remember especially watching that pilot and thinking like, wow, this is a really cool, a new thing, and these special effects are really great. In terms of the storyline, I do remember it being kind of a, fish out of water story of the week kind of thing. And I remember the characters pretty well, but other than that, like specific episodes, specific storylines, like nothing. So this was kind of cool to get back into it and see a couple of different types of stories.
Dave, more importantly, do you remember when they said Sliders?
Oh, yeah. Yeah, that's my favorite part. They go, Sliders.
And did you guys notice that in season 3 in these episodes, one of the episodes they don't say it, and the second one it's a different Sliders, and I'm pretty sure it's Jonathan Rhys Davies doing it.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, it was a different guy saying. It was a different guy whispering. I was like, why would they change the whisper?
Well, here's the thing: is we've now watched the first 3 seasons or episodes of the first 3 seasons. It's different every time.
I know.
Sometimes there's a whisper, sometimes there's no whisper. Although I will say, this new season, I like the new theme music. I think it's my favorite theme music so far.
And not only is the theme music different, I don't know if you noticed, Luke, every season so far, they've changed the narration. Mm-hmm. And I would argue this is the best narration. And apparently they do keep this for seasons 3 through 5. It feels like each one was like a working draft and it gets a little tighter each season. And this third one is by far the best. Yeah, they've
really got this almost on lockdown, except for deciding whether they whisper Sliders or not.
I think it's like they did it live and the guy sometimes just forgets to do it. He's like, oh, I missed it. Oh, well, we'll get it next week.
They probably didn't realize at the time that it was going to be the most iconic part of the show, the most well-remembered part of the show.
You're probably right. And it is weird that it is, because we've said this before, and I think in probably another podcast. Honestly, it's what people always say. It's just Sliders, which is so weird. That's the thing that people remember. It's not, hey, do you remember that time where what's his face tried to have sex with his teacher? It's like Sliders.
Well, on that note, maybe we should get into this week's episodes. Here's the IMDb summary for Season 3, Episode 2, Double Cross. The Sliders arrive on a world that has dwindling natural resources. While there, Rembrandt gets sidetracked by his #1 fan. Meanwhile, Quinn and the others meet a group of scientists trying to perfect a sliding device of their own, where they may have the technology to get the sliders home. All is not what it seems. I've butchered that, but whatever. What are we going to do?
It's perfect.
They can say that in every episode. All is not what it seems. Hey, I want to say one thing real quick. This idea of what is, there's a trope we'll talk about, and I looked it up because I was like, I guarantee there's a name for it. That's going to be a little bit important in this episode, and it's called the opposite sex clone. That's the trope. And I looked it up to do a little research on it. And the earliest I found, because it's been through a lot of science fiction, there's two literary works that I found that I think are the first ones that use this. One was an Ursula Le Guin book called 9 Lives, where the plot is they're geniuses that are cloned in mixed sex groups. And so they're constantly having sex with each other and they're themselves. And then there's another book by Robert Heinlein, which his book is, everything about him is like a parody of his own writing. But he has a book called, from 1973, a few years later, called Time Enough for Love, where opposite sex clones become each other's sexual partners.
Nice.
And if that's not a Robert Heinlein book, I don't know what is.
So anytime you have an opposite sex clone, you just got to have sex with that clone?
I think weirdly, like, that's just like the thought people go to. They're like, hey, what if I was a clone? You didn't have sex with that clone.
I mean, wouldn't you, Jordan?
You know, I was watching this with someone, and it's literally the first thing I said. I was like, he's gonna have sex with that clone, isn't he? Did you think that, Dave?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, and why wouldn't you?
Why isn't that? Isn't that a weird knee-jerk reaction that we have?
Is that incestuous to do that? Is that wrong?
No, it's perfect.
Okay.
No, I don't know. I think there's. I'm sure if you read either of Ursula Le Guin or Robert Heinlein, I'm sure they talked about the morality of such more than Sliders will, because Sliders doesn't have time for it. It's more of like, can you believe this? But it is a funny thing that I think probably everyone watching the show is like, is that going to happen? And they sort of flirt with it a little bit in a weird way in this episode, but they don't go all the way, obviously. In many ways, am I right? Yeah, so Luke, I don't know, would you have sex with your own clone?
It's a good question. Would I find myself attractive? It's a real question of how much I hate myself.
You know what, Luke, that's actually a good point. Would you find yourself attractive? Because I think most people maybe wouldn't. I don't think I would. I don't think I'd find myself attractive.
You might be annoyed by yourself.
Like, he's really annoying.
Yeah, it's a good question. Let's all pull up pictures of our partners and decide how much they look like. Jordan, imagine everyone's just like, wow, she looks exactly like you.
Yeah, I'd be like, really?
You'd be like, do I like myself more than I thought?
No, I would never be able to get a word edgewise in.
That has nothing to do with personality, Jordan. It's looks we're talking about.
Oh, it looks. Sorry, yeah. Anyways, that's just a big lead to what this episode is.
Yes, that's right. The Sliders are landing on a new Earth this week. And, of course, this time they land in a subway tunnel. And am I crazy? Did it seem like it was the first time they'd ever encountered a subway in their lives?
Yeah, he didn't realize it was a subway tunnel until he put his hand on the tracks, and he was like, oh no, it's a subway tunnel. And then they decided to run.
I was hoping it was the third track.
I know, they're like, there's a light coming toward us. We see the tracks. They're like, where could we be? I'm like, you're clearly in a subway tunnel.
I love it. I love how confused they were. I thought it was going to be like a Ghost Dad situation where the train was going to come and be a ghost train. They were going to go through it like, ah, and then go through a look for someone's body. That's what I was hoping, but it's not.
I read that it may have been an allusion, with an A, to the scene in Stand By Me where they're running from the train.
Really?
Do you think they were that thoughtful about this scene?
I do not.
I don't know. I think that's a stretch, but maybe.
Both Jerry O'Connell.
That's true.
That's true.
Both Jerry
That is
O'Connell.
true. But yes, this train is bearing down on them, and they are only saved by a regularly scheduled blackout that is announced, because on this world, they have a 10 a.m. blackout every day. And this is really a lead-in to what this world is all about. Every week, we go to a new world. It has new rules. It has new variations on what we're used to. So you guys want to discuss kind of what this Earth is all about?
I'll tell you one thing. Gas is $4.10 a gallon.
410 a gallon.
Yeah, 410. Oh, sorry, I call it 410. That's how the kids say it.
Makes it sound like $4.10.
You're right. You're absolutely right. The $410. I don't know, Dave. How would you describe the world?
Well, yeah, it's like a resources-starved world where San Francisco and LA have merged into a super mega city, and it sounds like food is not readily available, so there's kind of constructed food. You can't just get a hot dog when you ask for it. People are driving around in those weird electric cars that they were doing for land speed tests in the desert, and riding around on weird bikes. There's no regular cars. There are some motorcycles apparently, though.
I like that this is at least the third world, and Dave, you wouldn't know this, but the third world and third episode, I would say at least 3. There may be more. Luke, you can correct me. Where the first thing they do is go to get a hot dog. Isn't that a weird thing that they're always doing, Luke?
I mean, they love street food. They've kept that very consistent.
Yeah, it's just like that's always. They're like they get there and they go. It's like the joke is Arturo falls on Rembrandt. It's annoying because he's fat. You have to wait for how long there's a fat joke, and then they're like, we're hungry. Let's get a hot dog. That's how every Sliders episode starts.
What is the name of the orange or yellow goop they're able to buy? Do you guys remember?
I do.
From the hot dog man?
Dave, did you get it?
I didn't write it down.
Geomash.
Nice.
Get a little geomash instead of a hot dog?
Yeah.
Sounds pretty good.
It sounds okay.
Yeah, because you know what I have to say, it is a fun little way of showing you're in a new world, and they use it sometimes better than others. And this one, it was okay, where it's like everything looks they can tell right away something's a little off, and then when they get the geomash instead of a hot dog, they know. But I don't think we ever actually said the whole thing with the train is that the train stops because the power's out. Did we say that?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Oh, okay. I just had my own little outage. Sorry.
Small power outage in your brain.
Yeah. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, it seems to be a world also where there seems to be, they imply there's a big divide between the rich and everybody else. Though oddly, I found that the whole world looked more like a utopia than a dystopia.
Yeah, kind of. It was very bright and sunny, and everyone was dressed in kind of light clothes, kind of like it's the late 80s, and yeah, like everyone seemed pretty happy. It wasn't dark enough to be a dystopia at all.
Everything became the Netherlands.
Yeah, essentially. Lots of trains, lots of bikes everywhere. I will say, Jordan, we've watched a lot of these episodes now. I think this is one of the best worlds they've ever come to in terms of just like setup and not worrying too much about explaining it. And they're just like, oh, what a fun world.
Yeah, I agree. Too bad they spend the plot on other things other than like learning about this world and like, I don't know, anything that was interesting I found.
I have one last question for you.
Yeah.
Did you catch the name of the mega city that encompasses all of California?
I did. Dave, I'm going to throw it to you again.
It's San Angeles, right?
Yeah,
That's
San
correct.
Angeles.
They're in San Angeles.
I like that. I thought that was pretty well done.
Is that also the name of the city in Grand Theft Auto? I think it might be.
No, it could be. It's something very similar to that for sure.
It's the same universe.
Yeah, they transitioned to the Grand Theft Auto universe this week. And almost immediately upon arriving, as we said, it's mostly not cars, but there are a few cars kicking around that the mega rich drive. And literally they arrive and a gold Rolls Royce stops with the license plate Crying Man. And I thought it was going to be a double, but it's not. Who gets out is the wealthy daughter of the creator of paperless toilets. Which, isn't that just a bidet? I don't understand what a paperless toilet
Was that what it was? They were a creator of paperless toilets?
The daughter.
Her father was.
Oh. I know it's Monique.
And she's Rembrandt's #1 fan. And she had recently thought, I think his double's in Europe. So she's like, I thought you were away. And she's just like, hey, I love you. Why don't you come on a date with me in LA? I'll fly you back there on my private plane. And Rembrandt comes back to the Sliders and says, would it be cool if I go on a date with this woman down in LA? And what did you expect them to say?
Well, here's the thing. The show is so inconsistent because sometimes it's almost as if they have like a prime directive where they're like, don't interfere. And that, I think, comes out either this episode or the next episode. But this one, it's like Arturo's like, yeah, you got the chance. You should go for it.
I love, too, they're less like, we've got 32 hours. Yeah, sure, go ahead. Fly down to LA. I was like, you guys insane?
Yeah, just meet us back at this time.
And once again, it's so funny because, like, I don't know what they're trying to do with Wade, but it's just like, all the boys are like, yeah, go get it, Rembrandt. And she's just like, man. And I'm like, what is this? What is this show?
I have to say, this B plot of what Rembrandt's going to be going through with his relationship and series of events.
Well, let's talk about it right now.
Let me just say this right off the bat. It is the worst B plot this show has ever done, and might be the worst B plot we've ever seen in a TV show.
Wow.
I hated it so much. I hated it.
It's literally the same as another B plot Rembrandt's already done. It's the same B plot.
This is worse.
Well, Rembrandt flies down to LA with this woman, and we, the viewer, know the date is a little bit weird when Monique, the woman he's on a date with, she tells the bartender at the bar they're at that she's Rembrandt's fiance.
Yeah, she's crazy. That's what you're supposed to think as a viewer. She's crazy.
But we also get a great bit where Rembrandt has to eat frog sweetbread and he thinks it's gross, and you're like rolling in the aisles at how funny this comedy is.
Well, I think the joke, to be fair to the show, and I can't believe I'm defending it, is that all of the food, as we mentioned, is sort of the resources are short, so people are eating things that we're not normally used to eating as a Western audience. So all these things seem crazy what they're eating. So I think you allow it. I think the audience maybe would have, at the time, would have had a little chuckle about that. So I think I'll allow it. I mean, it's dumb, but whatever. It was 1997 or whatever.
Jordan liked it. Jordan had a great time.
Well, I said it's the only thing I'm going to defend.
As this episode progresses, we just keep cutting back to Rembrandt, and he goes for a dip in her hot tub back at her house. She says, let's go up to my room, or she calls it his room. And when they go upstairs, she's like, has a shrine, a crazy shrine to the crying man. And then she appears dressed in a wedding gown, and Rembrandt knows he's in trouble.
Yeah. You know what it looked like? I remember I once watched those things. You know those like those TV shows where you'd see like musicians and actors, like their fancy houses. What was that show called?
Lifestyles of the Rich and Famous?
Sure. It was one of those. Yeah, it was who was the guy who used to do that? Anyways, that was the English guy. It doesn't matter. The point being, I once saw one, and it was Gene Simmons, and his house was essentially like a shrine to himself. And I was like, what a dickhead.
Whoa, controversial, going after Gene Simmons.
A couple of non-Kiss fans on this podcast.
Yeah, I think it's well regarded as a dickhead. I don't think people are going to be up in arms about that.
At any rate, Rembrandt spends the night still at this place because we catch up with him the next day, and he's trying to talk his way out of Monique's home. She's a little crazy, but he does say, he's like, I just need to go to San Francisco for a quick meeting, and she's willing to let him do it if he sings her a quick song. And I would say, we've talked about this in a previous episode, they finally do that thing that I said they should have done that last episode, where he's supposed to sing a song that his double here sings all the time, but he doesn't know. And they kind of do that where she's just like, don't sing the song you know, sing this other song. And he just starts singing and somehow guesses all the lyrics correctly.
Yeah, I wrote down what the song was. Do you know what it was, Luke?
No, I blocked those things out.
It was, I Pawn My Gold Crown for You. That was the name of the song she wanted him to sing.
All right, great stuff.
I think the idea is that I guess those songs are kind of in him, and so just with a bit of prodding, maybe it could come out and he could write it as if the double had. Maybe that's
I guess
it.
that's true, right? He could, if told the title, he can just invent the song that his double would have invented. That's probably true. You're probably right, Dave.
It's another excuse to have the actor sing anyway.
He does a good job.
My biggest problem with this is that I feel like it's very unrealistic that he doesn't sleep with the crazy lady, because he's in town for 36 hours. He's leaving this planet forever. Yeah, she's a bit crazy, but he would do it. He would do it. Why wouldn't he do it?
Are we sure he doesn't?
I think they imply he does.
Well, I thought he slept in the other room to kind of get away from her. She finds him the next morning.
Oh, you're right. You're probably right.
No, they don't do it. Big mistake.
Big mistake.
Dave, you've got some interesting dating advice. If you're in town for 36 hours and you meet a person with severe mental derangement, it's all right.
Wow. It's very attractive, though.
She had a pool. She had bathrobes at the ready.
What more do you want?
Those are all pluses in the pro column.
Mm-hmm.
But in the pure sitcom manner of this B plot, who should walk in at that exact moment but Monique's fiance?
And he's big and muscular.
And he's just like, what are you doing in my fiance's house? I'm going to beat you up. And Rembrandt is forced to run away.
Yeah.
I like that the fiance apparently doesn't have a problem with his girl having like a room dedicated to this R&B singer.
He knows she's a fan, number one fan. It's literally the license plate on her golden Rolls Royce.
Yeah, true.
Well, that's the thing. He's like, you can make a room for him. You can even change the license plate in our Rolls Royce, but don't you ever fly him over to this house. And then she got the opportunity, and she did it. She broke the one rule.
At any rate, Rembrandt is now stuck in L.A. He needs to get back to the neighborhood of San Francisco in order to meet the Sliders, so he rushes to a train station. But as we see, all the people getting on the train are just handing the conductor just stacks of $100 bills or something.
Yeah, inflation, I guess. I don't know. That's the thing. It's like, not that it would have been maybe that much more interesting, but it's weird to have set up stuff in this society and not really get into it. I mean, I know in the A plot, it's the point of what the characters are doing, but I just thought it was weird. I'm like, well, why is this happening? Like, is it resources? Is it money? Why is the system being set up this way? But sure, it's stacks of money.
You don't buy tickets for trains anymore. You just walk around with a wad of cash.
Yeah, I guess.
But of course, Rembrandt sees a few less fortunates climbing on top of the train, and they're going to ride the top of the train back to San Francisco. So Rembrandt's just like, Me too. And he climbs up there and he talks to a nice man who's on top of the train. And the man's like, did you bring your equipment to strap on to the top of the train? It goes 200 miles per hour. Of course, Rembrandt doesn't have that, so he just ties his belt to the side of the train and off it goes.
It didn't really amount to that thing, though, huh? Other than when he gets to the end of the episode, his like clothes are a little torn, and you're like, wow, he went through some comedy.
Yep, that's it. That's the whole Rembrandt subplot is he goes to L.A., meets a lady who's unwell, and then catches a train back home.
Doesn't even sleep with her.
And you're right, Luke. This is almost the exact plot of the other one, except he's kidnapped by a deranged ex-band member. Is that the one you're thinking of?
I was thinking of the episode where the reversal of roles of the sexes were happening, and he just spent the week with a woman in an apartment and then joined the sliders at the end.
I forgot about that. So this is his B plot 3 times.
They really need to find a way just to get Rembrandt out of the show every episode.
Well, I think we said this on the last episode we were covering, is that there's like 4 characters, or maybe we haven't, but it doesn't it seem... there's a trend amongst shows, and a lot of times of shows that things aren't clicking very well, that they just don't know what to do with the characters. And you think they only have 4 people in the show. That's not a huge cast. And it seems like they have to split them up, but for not very good reasons. Or they have to have a character go off and have their own plot, but it's never very good. And it's because they don't know what to do. It's like they don't have enough lines to go around. And it's like, this is not that complicated. You can have a thing where you have 4 people actively doing things.
They certainly don't really land a B plot that ties into the A plot very often. It's usually very separate, very disposable, and very unrelated even to the themes of the world they're on sometimes.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, even on the episode you mentioned, Luke, where there was the gender reversal world, like Wade almost had nothing to do. You think that'd be a prime example to have the one female character to be driving the story forward, but they're like, nah.
No. Jordan, not Wade. We couldn't possibly.
Yeah. More Jerry O'Connell. Hey, I'll say this. I feel like every season Jerry O'Connell's getting better looking.
I mean, he doesn't get worse looking, I'll tell you that. Have you seen him these days?
Is he looking even better?
Oh, he's looking as good as he's ever looked.
Good for him.
Anyway, let's get on to the main plot of the episode with Quinn, Wade, and Arturo. They're going to have a very different kind of psychosexual adventure.
That's true.
Soon after they arrive and Rembrandt leaves, a bunch of goons on motorbikes show up with guns and pursue them. And they're from a company called Prototronics. And they're led by a scientist named Logan St. Clair. And Logan explains once they're captured that they aren't in trouble, but the company has been developing their own sliding technology. In fact, she's created an 8-dimensional echoing process that actually tracks sliders. And that's how she knew they arrived. She tracked their slide hole arriving on this planet.
Right. And we're going to find out very quickly that not only do they know they're sliders, but they actually know one of them, which is Arturo. Arturo's double is a slider type character that works at the company.
Yes. In fact, he died 2 days ago in one of their slide holes in a terrible accident.
I don't like that you're saying slide holes. That sounds gross.
What are they then?
Have you guys been saying slide hole the whole time?
Luke,
how would you describe them?
Portal?
Slide portal?
Portal hole?
Dave, that's disgusting. It's a slide hole.
I just assume we can't use the same terminology they used on Stargate, so I'm not calling them slide gates.
Okay. That makes sense.
Is that what they call them? Slide gates?
No, but they're Stargates on Stargate, so I assume they're not called slide gates on this one.
That makes sense. I that's incredibly embarrassing that I didn't know what the portal was called on a show called Stargate.
Prototronics, of course, their slide holes, they're very unstable. Anything that goes in them, when it comes back out, ends up burnt to a crisp. So we know that's kind of how Arturo's double died in this world. And the sliders, always the generous sorts, they offer to help them fix their slide technology, and in return, maybe they can use this equipment to find their own way home, per usual, per the mandate of the show. But of course, they only have 32 hours in order to do this, so it's not a lot of time. It's at this point that the shadowy boss who works at Protonics takes Logan St. Clair aside and informs her that they did a thermo scan of their unique thermo signatures when they all walked in. And he's like, by the way, this Quinn character, he's your exact duplicate. You guys are twins or something. So why don't you use your feminine wiles to keep them here longer than 32 hours so they can help us fix our slide machine?
Yeah, so I have a question about that. So... you know what? Interesting, a concept that could be done, nuanced or not, of you are in a different dimension or different universe or different world, and there's a version of you, but something has happened, so genetically you are now the opposite gender. That's an interesting thing. But then how that then becomes what we kind of joked about earlier in the podcast, why that suddenly becomes about having sex with one another. I'm like, well, shouldn't it have been like you might intrinsically know what he would do because you actually have the same genetic material, or there is some other connection that way. Like you can win him over because you know how he can be manipulated. Those may not be the terribly more interesting episodes, but it makes more sense then. Yeah, he's your exact double. You should flirt with him.
Yeah, he knows you have a foot fetish.
Yeah.
It is very odd, and at first I thought it was odd. I thought it was a mean boss, an evil boss trying to force a subordinate to do something they didn't want to do. But then later in the episode, we're going to discover that Logan, Quinn's double, she's also just evil. Like she's just like flat out evil, like a cartoon villain.
Like a Bond villain, yeah.
So she really turns out what I thought was going to be this thing where she's like off put by having to do this. She's fine. She doesn't care. She's into it. And you know what? She starts flirting with Quinn, and Quinn's loving it. He doesn't know yet he's a double, but Quinn immediately just falls for it.
Is Quinn, of our characters, we have 4 characters, we've almost seen all of them get some sort of romantic entanglement. Luke, who's the horniest of our 4 characters?
It's Arturo.
Is Arturo?
Well, what we're going to discover very quickly is after Quinn sort of starts ignoring Arturo and Wade because they're like, something seems suspicious at this company. He's like, no, this pretty girl likes me. It's fine here. So Arturo and Wade start looking into like, they're like, it's weird my double died in a slide hole accident. He would never be so careless. Or, Arturo's like, I would never be so careless, so why would my double be so careless? And they catch an $85 cab ride back to the hotel Prototronics is putting them up at. And Jordan, you must have loved this $85 cab ride reference because they were charged an overweight surcharge.
I thought that was pretty good.
I know. It's honestly, I'm just waiting for it. See, Dave, again, you haven't seen the previous episodes, but like every episode, they have to have a joke about how he's fat. And I feel so bad for the actor because it's like, it's not like he's like morbidly obese. Like he's a little bit overweight.
He's a big boy. Yeah.
He's a big guy. But it's just like every episode, it's like, can you believe how fat he is? It's like, all right, guys, this poor actor.
But they show up at this hotel, and the hotel clerk recognizes Arturo immediately. And I will say, Jordan, I was disappointed it wasn't Will Sasso. Wasn't that going to be the thing? Always Will Sasso working at these hotels.
That's right. He was at least in 2 or 3 episodes. Will Sasso was the hotel guy, but I think he's out. He's on to Mad TV days now.
This hotel clerk, though, he recognizes Arturo because Arturo frequents the hotel on his nooners, where he's cheating on his wife with a variety of young women. And this clerk is like commenting on Wade and how Wade's pretty good, but he likes his last nooner, quote unquote nooner. And then he describes a very generic woman that Arturo is immediately able to understand is Logan on this world. So in this world, Arturo was cheating on his wife with Quinn's double.
Yeah. So maybe there'll be a plot line later in the episodes where Arturo and our Quinn are going to have an affair.
And it's very funny because there's a weird thing where Wade's just like, who would have an affair with you? And Arturo's like, I have my charms. And I think we'll see it in the next episode too. And we've seen it in repeated episodes before this. Arturo's doubles are always having affairs, are always sleeping with young women. And I have to assume that reflects on Arturo's character as well.
I think so. I think he's maybe not. He's not the nicest guy, maybe. Maybe that's what we're learning.
But to your question, Jordan, he's the horniest.
Okay. Hey, and I have a follow-up question. So this guy at the hotel you mentioned, like the bellhop or whatever he is, the concierge, he's given a lot of like, like, can you believe it? I can't believe you're doing. Don't you think? Now I've never had an affair. It seems very adult. But let's say you're going to a regular hotel for said liaisons, and don't you think like discretion is what you're looking for the hotel, not them to comment on the attractive level?
That's not what you want.
Yeah,
you wouldn't be coming back to this hotel again. This man is very indiscreet.
Yeah. So anyways, I'm just saying, not a great establishment for an affair.
And flash forward to the end of the episode, Arturo, as he's leaving, he gives the bellhop something and says, give this to my wife. And I'm just like, how does the bellhop know who your wife is too? Why does the bellhop have so much information?
You know what? Maybe it's that sort of thing like, remember in Goodfellas where the mobsters take their wives to the hotel and then to the restaurant, and then the next time they come and take their girlfriends? Maybe it's that sort of thing. He also takes his wife to the hotel.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah, he goes into the hotel and the bellhop says, "Oh, Mr. Arturo, we haven't seen you in so long."
Exactly.
He was just there the night before.
See, no. See, that's what he should do. But this guy would be like, "Hey, weren't you just here with that hot broad?" Because he's terrible.
At any rate, the Wade and Arturo remember that Logan had claimed to barely know Arturo's double. So they know something's up. This is weird. So they go visit Arturo's widow on this world. And she sort of says she found it strange after her husband died because her husband wouldn't also take this kind of risks. But also Prototronics asked her to keep quiet about the death because they're going to keep it under wraps to avoid bad press. So, Arturo and Wade are very suspicious about this whole thing. So they head back to Prototronics. They do that classic thing on Sliders where Arturo pretends to be his double so they can trick a security guard, allowing Wade to sneak into the security computer and have a look at the security footage.
Yeah.
It's all been scrubbed from the night Arturo died, but they are able to find a backup. And in the backup, you're able to see evil Logan, evil Quinn's double, push Arturo into the deformed slide hole, essentially murdering him.
I watched that 3 times, by the way. It made me laugh so much. There was something so cartoony about it.
Just going back to the meeting with Arturo and his double's widow, did anyone notice that she was walking around outside with a beaker, and that when she found him, she dropped the beaker on the ground and it smashed? Because it kind of seemed like she was carrying that around for the express purpose of dropping it in shock.
That is great.
Everyone knows her in the office. She's just constantly oh, she's such a drama queen. Here she comes with a beaker. She's going to pretend to be surprised again for attention. I didn't actually notice that, though.
No, me neither. That's a great catch. That's very funny to be like, oh, we're about to shoot the scene. Get her a beaker.
She was walking around outside like in a park.
But as Wade is copying this video file onto a 3.5-inch floppy disk, which I have to assume is going to be 8 pixels, this whole video, when she put it on there. But she gets caught by the evil boss of Prototronics, and we know she's in trouble now.
Mm-hmm.
Do you guys remember how much storage space is on a floppy disk like that? Do you remember?
No, do you?
I didn't.
I could be wrong, but I think it's like 1.44 megabytes. It's like a megabyte and a bit. It's not much.
Yeah, I was imagining that video is going to be very unwatchable. At any rate, the next morning, we cut to Arturo. He can't find Wade. She's been missing all night. And he bumps into Quinn outside the hotel and tells Quinn that Logan killed Arturo on this world. They can't trust her. She's evil or something. And at that exact moment, Wade shows up on a bicycle and says, "Oh, hey, I talked my way out of trouble. Nothing to worry about here." And
Yeah. It was the funniest thing because I think there's actual commercial break there. Like, where is she? Oh no, we don't know where she is. And then commercial, we come back and it's like she comes on a bicycle and she's like, "Hey guys, no big deal, I got out." And you're like, either this is the dumbest resolution to a cliffhanger I've ever seen, or this is sketchy.
And it turns out to be sketchy because Arturo and Wade go back to their investigation, and the double's widow, they go back to her, and for some reason the second visit to her, she's like, "Oh, yes, of course. I forgot to tell you last time. My husband was quite upset by a video disc he found in which the company was going to use his invention for evil." And they're like, "Oh, that's good to know." And I was like, "Why didn't you mention this the first time?"
I was just thinking, Luke, just going back a little bit, when we're, no spoiler, we're going to find out this is a fake Wade. And in the previous episode we watched, there was a fake Arturo thing, and they didn't know if they got the right Arturo. Wouldn't it be great if every episode they have this sort of dilemma, and by the end of the season, you have a bunch of characters that are just from different worlds, all their doubles? That's
They
a
never
good
met
show.
before. They're all just like, "Oh, weird adventures are going on now."
They're confused. The audience is confused. Great. What a great show.
But fake Wade does give herself away here because she doesn't know that on Arturo's world, he didn't invent the slide machine like he did here. So she says something. It's so funny because Arturo, it's such a dead giveaway. Arturo's like, "Did you just say I invented sliding?" And she's like, "Why, of course. If you invented sliding on this world, why wouldn't you have invented sliding on your own world?" I'm just like, well, fake Wade, why are you giving yourself away?
Yeah, she's not good on her feet. She should have been like, no, you said it. Anyways, what's that? Someone's calling me, and got out of the room. That's what I would have done.
Instead, Arturo ties her up in a closet. And then he and Wade join forces. They go to search his double's office to try to find this video disc that had upset the dead Arturo so much. They find it, they put it on, and I assume this video disc would be like security footage of something, or where they are talking about their evil plans. But it's more like a corporate video where they're talking straight to camera, explaining that they're going to use sliding to raid the natural resources of other worlds and then bring them back to this world so that Prototronics can hoard them in order to, I believe they say, hold this Earth hostage.
Yeah, I think it checks out. But I'll say to your point, Luke, I think the video, and maybe you both disagree with me, I thought the video was like an internal video to like stakeholders or something like that. Like it's an internal video where everyone that would be watching this video knows what they're doing. You know what I mean? Like it'd be like one of those old cigarette memos where they're sending memos to each other knowing that cigarettes cause cancer, but they never want it to get out. That's what I kind of assume. But do you think it's not that?
I mean, it's probably that. It was just so strange to like record a video of your absolutely evil plans for dissemination and be like, hopefully this never gets out.
Yeah. I mean, you don't want to put a good spin on it. They don't at least do a good spin at all.
No, it did feel like this is for not public consumption, but definitely it's going out to the shareholders in a way, being like, we're about to hold this Earth hostage. Get ready, everybody.
What they should have done is at the end, they should have like put their fingers together and just said, money. And then you go, oh, it's all okay.
Yeah, a more sophisticated show would maybe, I mean, have you heard the thing of everyone's the hero of their own story and no one considers themselves to be villains? If it could have been written in a more sophisticated way, maybe they could have done it in such a way that they didn't just seem like they were evil and looking to destroy the world.
There's no time, though, because Rembrandt has to have sex with that woman.
Dave has already disproven that never happened.
No, but you make a good point, Dave, though. You're right. If this was a little bit more sophisticated, a little bit more nuanced, but to be fair to the show, this show is kind of like, it's almost to the point where it's like a live action cartoon and sometimes. So like they're not that interested in delving into like the morality of things or any sort of philosophical debates that may come from this. That's not what they're concerned in, but it's interesting that they always seem to set that up because you're right. There's an interesting idea here about like the world is needing resources. So they have some justification, morally wrong or not, that they would be looking to do things to save themselves. There's an argument there, but that's not what this is. Yeah. It's like, can you believe how evil they are?
Well, with this new piece of evidence discovered, Quinn and Arturo are about to race out with it. But of course, as we've already said, Logan is Quinn's double, so she has anticipated everything they have done up till this moment and is ready to ambush them with her goons. And it's at this moment she finally reveals to Quinn that they are in fact twinsies.
Yeah, she gives a whole thing. She's like, by the way, my name's actually Logan Mallory. But the one thing I noted, and it might only be me, was she not dressed exactly like Ronald McDonald?
I didn't notice.
Oh, yeah.
Right?
It was a weird outfit. Yes, it was a weird outfit.
She was wearing a red and yellow, like, overall outfit. And I was like, she's dressed like Ronald McDonald. Anyways, it was really distracting.
It wasn't very intimidating. Yeah.
It wasn't intimidating. That's true. The guys behind her, though, all have guns. So that adds the intimidation factor. But yes, she sort of reveals that... whatever, the dad, and she's changed her name because of a stepdad or blah, blah, blah. The point is she's Logan Mallory. And Quinn gets one of the best lines in the episode where he says to her, what dark corner of our soul did you crawl out of? And I laughed and laughed.
You didn't like when after the reveal was done, Quinn stands there like a moron and says, how could my double be a woman? That's an exact quote.
And Arturo just like slaps his head and he's like, what a duds.
Well, Arturo has to explain it to him, and I'm just like, why is Quinn dumb? I don't understand.
He's dumb, but he also invented the, what did we call the slide hole? Is it slide hole machine? Slide holio? What did we say?
Yeah, the slide holio machine. At any rate, with this all out of the way and all this information deposited, Wade and Arturo attack the goons. They're winning. They're beating up goons with guns because they're so physically superior.
Of course.
But Logan opens one of the deformed slide holes that kills you and pushes this Arturo into it as well. And we're like, oh no, Arturo is going to die.
And, there was a minute only because I know that that character and that actor will be leaving the show pretty soon. I don't know how long, but I was like, is this how they're going to do it in this like really anticlimactic way? But no, they're not. Don't worry for Arturo fans. He's not dead.
No. Logan takes Quinn back to the Prototronics lab, and as soon as Quinn gets in there, he looks up and he notices two things. The automation he set up to fix their sliding technology has finished and has now fixed their sliding technology. And B, he's noticed that the wormhole Arturo was pushed into on the wormhole screen above them that tracks wormholes is just going in a full circle and going to spit Arturo back out where he went in for some reason. So he's just like, Arturo will be fine.
I had a question about that. Was this how their slide holes always worked, or is it just because he had been fixing the formula that's why he's not burnt, or did they just make mistakes before?
No, I think what the idea is over the course of the episode, what Quinn's been doing with Logan is he's hooked his slide timer up to their slide timer, and he's basically just been comparing the code line by line, and then the computer's just fixing their code to match his code, essentially, is what I think the idea behind it, and that's how he's fixing their slide problem.
But then why would it? Is it because the code's not finished? That's why it's working, but it's just sending you back to your original spot?
No. I think that's just a coincidence that this slide hole goes back to the original spot. It's that it's fixed it, so that's where he's not burning up on reentry.
This was the part that I didn't really understand why what was happening. But now I do, so thank you.
It's not focused on at all. You're just supposed to know Arturo's fine. He pops back out, and Arturo has a gun. They race in. Quinn's deleted the code that he's fixed, and they basically use that to like negotiate to get Wade back. So they bring Wade out. They've had her tied up somewhere. She's now dressed in a biking outfit because I guess that she swapped clothes with Evil Wade.
You know, if they didn't do that, the audience would have questioned where the alternate Wade got that leather jacket.
And then one of my favorite parts of this episode is with the gun, they all escape. They run out of Prototronics, and they all jump in clown cars that are waiting outside.
They were the tiniest little electric cars ever. It was funny. And I noticed that they focused on Arturo because I think it was, isn't it hilarious that this big guy's got to get into this tiny car?
And with 15 minutes left on their slide timer, they race back to the hotel where Rembrandt has just arrived back from LA, all tattered up from riding the train. Logan is, of course, in hot pursuit. She's got to stop these sliders. But as she gets to the hotel, there's a scheduled blackout. And that scheduled blackout inexplicably locks the exterior doors of the hotel.
Yeah, that was really weird, right? And this poor actress, I don't know if this is how she was directed, but she's got to like pound on the doors like she's like a silent movie star. Like it's so over the top how badly she wants to get into this hotel.
I also could be wrong, but I think it might have been it wasn't a revolving door, was it?
I think there was a revolving door, yeah.
Well, anyway, there's a brand on the revolving door.
This is a fire hazard, right? If your hotel has to do a blackout every like 30 minutes for 5 minutes and it locks all the doors on you.
It's a problem if you're having affairs.
Not fires, though. You're not worried about those.
Yeah, you're not worried about fires, just affairs.
At any rate, they slide away, and it looks like it's the end of the episode. But folks, it ain't over yet. Because it turns out Logan has switched the, quote, geographic spectrum stabilizers in their timer. And when they come out of their slide hole, why, they're in Los Angeles, not San Francisco. Because from now on, their slider timer has a radius of 400 miles. They could end up anywhere.
And there's a couple things about this. One, this episode has to lose 1 point because I was so angry that it just kept going because it was like over. And they're like, hey, guess what? There's more. And I'm like, I don't want any more of this episode. So it loses a point. The second thing is I'm pretty sure this is because it's now filming in California, Los Angeles area.
Yes,
right?
this is 100%
you can actually tell.
Correct, Jordan. The show is moved from Vancouver to LA so that the Fox executives could keep a closer eye on them. And for whatever reason, they're just like, well, no one's ever going to believe that LA could be San Francisco, not like Vancouver can be. So we have to move the whole show to LA now, like in the storyline.
I do love that thing where like, obviously some things you can see, some cities have very distinct features, but it's like, honestly, like I don't live in California. I couldn't tell the difference between San Francisco and Los Angeles. Would a normal person?
I don't know. It's a good question.
San Francisco, they got those trolleys. That's what I know.
Trolleys and there's hills. Yeah. It's hilly.
I do like, though, that it also is just like they announce it's like anywhere we slide from now, we could end up 400 miles away from there. And it also feels like a note from the studio. And I'm just like, finally, you've solved all of Slider's problems. They can now go 400 miles away.
Yeah, they were acting like it was a big deal. They're like, oh, no. But I didn't really understand the significance of it. I understand the behind-the-scenes significance of it, but I don't understand the in-world.
I would argue it didn't even matter because the beginning of the show, it seemed like they established, Luke, tell me if I'm wrong, that like at first they were always appearing right by where they went, right? So it was like they would always pop out almost exactly from where they left, but then they adjusted that slightly, and now it's like they've adjusted it again, right?
They never like articulated adjusting it. They still, I think the idea was you have to go from exactly where you left, but it did seem like they were sliding from slightly different places every time anyway. So, they had been like soft adjusting. They've been soft changing the rules as they worked on it. But for some reason, they decided they needed to hard adjust them. I think you're right, Dave, though. Like, what difference does it make? Why did you have to call it out? And I feel like someone on the production is annoyed they got moved to LA, to the point that when they land in LA, Arturo has a line where he says, "I hate Los Angeles." And I think this is just the writer's room or someone in charge being like, do a thing where we're angry, where we got moved to LA. I'm like, okay, I, the audience member, don't care.
This is the kind of attitude that got them pulled back to LA from BC in the first place.
This is absolutely the attitude that got them pulled back to LA.
But on the final note, and Luke, you mentioned this real briefly there at the beginning of our little tangent, is that I like that the idea, though, that they can land in a slightly further locale, that's the problem with the show. It couldn't be that. It couldn't be like the sloppy plot lines and bad characterization and like somewhat offensive feelings about stuff. It's like no. It's that we want to see more palm trees.
And Jordan, you would think now that they've told you about how they can now go further,
just keeps going.
That this episode is over. But you're wrong. There's still more episode, because a deformed slide hole opens. Logan emerges from it with a gun, and she's like, "I bet you forgot I could track slide holes." And I was like, "You bet I did."
Yeah.
She demands that Quinn fix her slide timer so that she won't burn up on re-entry. And then she's like, "I set my return slide hole for 30 seconds, so you have 30 seconds to fix this."
No, that in itself didn't really make sense. But I think what they were going for, and I could very well be wrong, and maybe this is giving too much to the show. I think it was sort of like her hard negotiation. She's like, "I'm not even giving you time to think. Like, you have 30 seconds to do this, or I'm going to kill you," is what she has a gun on them. But it does seem like, give yourself 2.5 minutes.
Yeah. It does seem very aggressive, but it's a great negotiating tactic, because all the other sliders, they want to call her bluff. They're like, she'll never do it because she won't get back to her place and she'll go to jail here. But Quinn's a good guy. He's the good double. He's the good twin. So he fixes it. However, when her return slide hole opens, he won't go through the slide hole. He won't enter that deformed slide hole to prove it to her. So she's in a real pickle. She has to test it herself. And in a fit of rage, as she jumps into her deformed slide hole, she shoots the gun. And we go into bullet time, and a bullet flies across the screen. It's going right for Wade's forehead. It's going to shoot her right in the forehead. And as the bullet gets to Wade's forehead, it stops dead in the air, turns 180 degrees, and flies back the opposite direction.
Yeah, and this made no sense.
It's the only object that is affected in this way by the portal, or the slide hole.
That was what I was trying to figure out too. I'm just like, is it that the slide hole is pulling it back in?
Yeah.
But I'm
yeah.
like, why? But nothing else is affected. And I'm like,
no.
Is Wade now psychic and she stopped the bullet? I didn't understand what was happening.
No. It has nothing to do with Wade. It's what Dave said. It's that for reasons, only the bullet is affected by the gravitational pull of the slide hole. Of the deformed slide hole.
Can you guys use the word deformed slide hole in a hashtag on a future post, please?
Anyway, with Logan gone, she's returned through her slide hole. Quinn reveals that, well, he did fix the burning up problem. He also set her timer for her to slide to a random dimension, and he's essentially cursed her to the same fate they have. She's now lost in the Slideverse, just like them. She just can't find her way home. And he's just like, except she can track our slide hole, so I guess we'll be seeing her again.
It's like, I bet you won't.
Did you guys read about this?
Well, we know, I checked IMDb. I know she's not in any more episodes, but I thought it was interesting that after we saw them create the Cro-Mags, who have the exact same backstory as this woman, they're just like, we don't like the Cro-Mags. What if we had Quinn's evil twin? Which is what I pitched in the Cro-Mag episode. They went and did it.
Let me ask this though. Let's say you guys are both sliders. You can be yourselves or a different character if you like, but you're a slider, and your twin is evil. And you have to punish them at the end. Do you think this is a fair punishment for her to send her essentially? It's essentially a death sentence because she's not going to get home. Do you think that's fair for what she's done?
I mean, you don't want to send her home because she's just going to raid all those other slide worlds and hold her Earth hostage.
I think it's fair.
You both think it's fair, huh? I thought it was overly cruel.
What would you have done?
Yeah.
Smooched. Smooch
Jordan would
her.
have got down on one knee and married her.
Well, she's wearing that Ronald McDonald outfit. How could you not?
So I read a little bit about the kind of plans for the future episodes featuring this character. I don't know if you guys did.
No.
That never happened. But basically, there's going to be a couple more. One with her as kind of like reprising her role as like a Moriarty type villain, like a counterpart to Quinn. And then the last one, she was going to kind of redeem herself and kind of die saving them or something like that.
Oh, wow.
Which would have been kind of a cool little arc, but unfortunately never happened.
I like it. I like it more than the last serialized element they had, which I mentioned before, the Cro-Mags. I think this is more interesting to me. I would have rather like just the evil doppelganger traveling around chasing them. That works more for me for this show. But yeah, never saw her again.
And for me, kind of my point I made earlier, I think it would be better if Quinn was gone and Logan is in. That's a better show.
Oh, you want to flip him completely?
Flip him completely. And we check in every now and then. We check in with Quinn, and he's on. He's on a planet where shoes are gloves. Can you believe it?
Making out with a glove.
Yeah.
And this is kind of half-assed research, but the other thing I read was that part of the reason why this actress didn't come back, or this character didn't come back, is that the producers didn't feel like she was like an attractive enough or a sexy enough character.
Jesus Christ.
Hopefully that's not true, but you know.
We're about to see this on the show because they're going to bring in a second female lead with, I think, a very similar reasons. They don't think Wade's attractive enough, so they're going to bring Carrie Werher, I believe her name is. Mm-hmm. But I think we're about to see that same change happen. These producers were very worried about attractive females on this show for some reason.
I would disagree, though. I like her 90s look with her like overly plucked eyebrows. I was into it.
Yeah, there's something about a lot of the women on this episode and the next episode. They all kind of look a little bit like Gretchen Mol. Like they're real
90s it girls.
I'm into it.
All right, should we move on to the next episode?
Yeah, The Guardian.
Okay.
Here's the IMDb summary for season 3, episode 4, The Guardian.
On our world, I did hit Brady with the bat. I busted his knee. Broke the bone in 4 places. He walked with a limp for the rest of his life.
You trained your double so he wouldn't strike out like you did.
By teaching him how to defend himself, I was hoping he wouldn't feel the need to act out of desperation. And he could trust his hands instead of a weapon.
On a world where time moves at a slower rate, Quinn encounters his younger double and tries to change a traumatic event in his life. Meanwhile, Arturo decides that it's time to grab life by the horns and takes the others on increasingly wild excursions.
I think I said earlier in one of the podcasts, Luke, that I was surprised that they weren't doing enough like work with the doubles, like they weren't coming across their own selves. And I take that back because these are the worst episodes ever when they keep coming into versions of themselves. I don't want to see gender reversed role of yourself, and I don't want to see kid version of yourself. And I'm going to say this. I hate this episode.
Well, it starts with Arturo leaving a CAT scan. He has a terminal illness, and it's clear now that John Rhys-Davies is leaving this show, right?
Well, it's funny. It almost felt like for a split second, and I think if you didn't, we're watching it with modern eyes, so some of the things that happen, and obviously we know he's going to be leaving the show soon. So you see the writing on the wall. But I'm wondering if as a viewer at the time you watched this and thought, oh, this is going to be a thing where they're going to go to a world that has a cure for cancer or something like that. Like it's going to be a small arc.
Yeah, I think at the beginning of the episode, I thought it was like, is this the writing on the wall? Is this like him asking to be written off? Or is this going to be just an episode where they go to a place and he's cured? As the episode plays out, we'll see it's not what that case is. He's not going to be cured by the end of the episode. So I think maybe as a viewer, you're wondering if eventually he'll be cured. But I do think probably people at home might have been like, especially if maybe there was some, I think there was probably some gossip around this time, especially I think if they're writing an early episode to prelude his exit. I think there's probably writing on the wall for even people in the 1990s being like, I guess he's leaving the show.
But maybe they thought it was going to be something genius like what they did in Picard, and they give him a disease for no reason so they can make him a robot at the end.
A Jonathan Rhys-Davies golem?
Yeah. You're like, hey, that's a terrible version of a character I loved and used to care about. Thanks a lot, guys.
Don't worry, though, Jordan. He's a robot, but they've ensured that it's programmed to only live to his normal lifespan.
And then they'll never speak of it again.
At any rate, he's got a month to a year left to live, and Quinn accidentally got one of his messages about his diagnosis at the hotel. So Quinn is showing up at the hospital to confront him.
By the way, I love this, and it made me laugh. I love that they've gone to a world. We don't know yet, like, how the world's that different. But he's had time to find a doctor, get a CAT scan, and they also, like, they're already getting, like, voicemails and stuff. I don't know if they said how long they're at the world, but there was something so funny about the normalization of their lives here in this other world.
It was a pretty chill world. Yeah.
Yeah.
Arturo informs him, he's like, with this diagnosis, with the knowledge he's going to die soon, he's decided to stay on this planet. He's just going to do a little traveling, live the rest of his life, and then die here because it's a pretty debilitating illness, and he doesn't want to, like, put that on Quinn and the others to watch him waste away. Quinn, of course, gets quite upset and yells at him a lot, and we see very quickly this is related to the death of his own father. Like, this is an issue related to some abandonment he has. And Arturo changes his mind remarkably quickly. They really need to get this scene over and done with. So Arturo's like, sorry, Quinn. Okay, I'll keep sliding with you. Let's go slide. I
know. It didn't quite ring true to have someone be like, someone you care about, you find out they have cancer. They admit it to you. This is a very sad, obviously it's a terminal illness. And he says, my last wish, I want to do this, blah, blah, blah. And then Quinn just yells at him and just berates him. And he goes, hey, you're right. You're right. That whole cancer diagnosis, don't worry about it.
But he does ask that Quinn not tell Wade and Rembrandt. He doesn't want them to know. So that's kind of where we're set up from as the episode starts. Is like, Rembrandt's going to die. Quinn knows, the other two don't. And that's pretty much all the information we'll get about the illness for the rest of the episode for the most part. But let's just deal with this now since it's so quick. They jump, they slide to a new world. We'll get into what the deal with this new world is in a second. We'll come back to it. But there's this, like, weird B-plot in this new world in which Arturo, Wade, and Rembrandt hang out. That's the whole thing. Quinn gets the entire A-plot, 90% of this episode to himself. The other three characters are then doing this, like, I'd say 10, maybe 5 minutes of screen time where Arturo just has some fun. They rent a luxury car and drive around in it. They talk about how they took Arturo to his first football game.
Not shown.
Mm-hmm. And I was a little confused because they say it was Arturo's idea to go to this football game. He's never seen a football before. And then Arturo says he gives full credit to Rembrandt's mother for the idea. And I didn't know what that meant.
I know. It's, well, one, I would say, for whatever reason, I don't know who wrote this episode. Actually, I think this one was directed by, oh yeah, it was. This is another Adam Nimoy directed episode, Luke.
It was written by Tracy Tromé.
Okay, so Tracy Trubay, the showrunner, is a terrible writer. And the dialogue in this episode specifically is so bad, and no one speaks like they're a human being. And so they also have lines like this where it's like, thank your mother for this idea. And I'm assuming that in an earlier draft, there was something with his mother. They went to visit the mother, and that was cut out, and they left the line in. Or even worse, they're just implying something for the audience that means nothing.
Yeah, I couldn't make heads or tails of it.
I assumed it was a cutscene or something. Yeah.
Yeah. Their adventures continue. They go to the opera together. They go to a biker bar because that's where Arturo wants to go. And at the biker bar, a young woman thinks Arturo's very attractive, so he, like, flirts with her and reads her poetry. And then her old man gets mad that they're talking, and Arturo knocks him unconscious.
It's great. Also, I'm going to say, remember early on, Luke, there was a kind of interesting character trait from Arturo that you picked up on, which was he sort of puts on airs of this guy who loves classical music and opera and poetry and these sort of things. But in the end, he has what we call maybe like some more base desires of, like, he just likes an old hot dog and, like, having a beer at a bar and that sort of thing. So I would assume if this is the case, which was kind of an interesting character trait for him, he's seen football before. If he's been to a bar and he goes to bars regularly as a secret, he's seen a football game. Am I right?
I think you're probably correct. Yes, I think this is probably the case. I also was just like, I think he's probably seen a football game.
Yeah. Anyways, it's not important, but it's just one of these. It's kind of a very small sesame seed of, like, just the laziness of the show sometimes, almost as if they haven't watched previous episodes or haven't really bothered to be consistent with the characterization at all.
I did want to bring up one thing at this bar they go to. When Arturo buys a drink for this young woman who finds him so attractive, she asks for a skip and go naked.
Is that what she did? I don't remember that.
Sounds like a real drink.
Yeah. She says, I think Arturo asked her, what would you like? And she says, a skip and go naked. And he's just like, oh my, I'm so flustered. And she's like, no, it's the name of a drink. And I was just like, what on earth is a drink with that name? So I looked it up.
Is it a real thing?
Yeah, it's a real drink.
All right, what's in it?
A skip and go naked is beer, lemonade, and vodka.
Ooh,
boy.
That sounds like an alcoholic's treat.
I'll get back to you guys about that.
At any rate, the final little adventure that Arturo, Wade, and Rembrandt go on is Rembrandt invents bungee jumping on this world.
That's right. Yeah, and it's not even. It's just like they have this thing like we want him to go bungee jumping, but why he did it in the most dangerous way possible, which is, and it's kind of like played for laughs, but I don't know what the point of it is. Like if he really wants to do bungee jumping, he's like, so let's just figure out how to do it by ourselves on a bridge. I'm like, well, that's a death wish.
The whole point is with that opening scene where Arturo's dying, we just get a whole thing where Arturo goes and lives life to the fullest, and like when Wade and Rembrandt are just along for the ride, and they don't really know what's happening. And I would argue, I'm not even sure this is a plot. Like, there's not like a story that happens in it. It's just like they go on a series of not even that outlandish adventures. They're just like football game, opera, bar, bungee jumping. And then it's their B plot's over, and Wade and Rembrandt don't learn why he's doing these things, and Rembrandt and Arturo just does them and has a nice time. Like, it is an odd B plot that doesn't exactly, like, we see him living life to the fullest because we know he's dying, but it doesn't go anywhere. There's no lesson learned necessarily, and it really relegates all three of our characters to nothing in this episode.
Yeah, you make a good point. Again, it's just something I said earlier. They don't know what to do with the characters. I think what they should have done is just a montage of a bunch of fun things with the music "You Are So Beautiful" playing above it.
I mean, why not? They should have. It basically is a montage, what we say.
Yeah, but you are so... Who's that? Joe Cocker? Who did that?
It's Joe Cocker.
Yeah, Joe Cocker.
R.I.P.
Yeah. Yeah, R.I.P.
Anyway, with that out of the way, let's go to the core story of this episode, is that this new Earth they've landed on is just like theirs, except it's the 1980s.
Yeah, and they do some mental gymnastics to make this work, huh?
It's so funny because I think I just watched the intro, because it happens right after the intro to the show, and in the intro, the big voiceover they've been working on that they finally perfected is just like, you travel to a new world, but it's the same year, and then immediately they're just like, no, we traveled back in time this time. We changed our minds. Time travel. We can have time travel as a treat. That's just this one time, though.
But they didn't time travel, Luke. The time just moves slower on this planet, so it's just catching up. You know?
Yes, Jordan. It's Van Meeren's theorem of straight relativistic time dilation that essentially says that maybe there's an Earth that spins a little bit slower on its axis.
I don't know, guys. This made sense to me. I liked it.
You liked it?
I did. I think it worked.
It's fine, honestly.
It's fine.
It's perfectly good techno babble to explain it away, and I thought it was very funny. I'm just like, sure, why not? Let's let them have a time travel episode. They had to have one eventually.
What do you think is one, either more reprehensible or more alluring? Having sex with yourself in an alternate world, or having sex with your grade school teacher?
Wait, reprehensible or alluring? That's two questions.
Either way. It was either. What do you think? Which way do you like it?
Well, I think you want to have sex with the hot teacher now that you're able to do so. Yeah.
You find that more alluring than sex with
That's
yourself.
alluring, yeah. Sex with yourself, which we've already determined is not okay. It's incest.
So you find that one reprehensible, or do you also find that one alluring?
Let's move on.
Either way, I was like, Quinn, go for it.
All right, Jordan, what about this? You're at a bar. It's a biker bar. You're having a great time. You're drinking a skip and go naked.
Yeah, I'm...
Two women approach you. One's your grade school teacher and one's a female W, and they're like, let's have a threesome. And you're like, yes or no?
I say, let's let East meet West. Remember that was a line from Essential Woman? Dave remembers that.
At any rate, let's get into this one. They've arrived in the 1980s. Immediately upon arrival, like the slide hole spits them out back in San Francisco after having been in LA for the last few episodes, apparently. They're like, oh, it's good to be back in San Francisco. They immediately walk into the funeral of Quinn's dad. Like,
yeah.
Immediately.
I mean, look, it was like, it's a time saver, but it is like it's a science fiction show, so you have to allow certain things. But like, this was really convenient as a way to get them. It's like, they have to go back to the 80s, and they're like, and it just happens to be in the exact day of his dad's funeral. I was like, all right, sure.
It kind of, and I think the character says it later on, where he says like he was kind of meant to be here and meant to do this. It does give some purposefulness to the kind of movements through these dimensions that I don't think it ever has. It's always seemed like kind of a random thing. Whereas
you do make a good point.
This particular one makes it seem like there was a reason for this, a deeper reason.
Yeah, I mean, that is what drives Quinn all episode is that he feels like he's here for a reason, like that fate has brought him to this moment, and does imply that perhaps fate brings them to every moment, but it's really only for the purpose of this episode, I suppose. Of course, at the funeral, we see in attendance are Quinn's mom, played by the original actress from the pilot. She's back, Jordan.
Was that the original actress?
Yeah, after they recast her, she's now back, apparently.
Oh, hey, good.
There's baby Quinn. There's a little baby Quinn version of him.
Yeah, that's right.
And as you have implied repeatedly, Quinn's grade school teacher is there. And I mean, as soon as you see her, you're just like, well, they're making out. Like, you know it the second you see her.
Yeah, she's not dowdy.
And I really like it. They arrive, they're watching this funeral, and Quinn is standing there gawking so aggressively, just like in a t-shirt and shorts, and like as people walk past him, that I'm just like, he must seem like the biggest creep.
Well, it's something that, again, I don't know if it's maybe fair to the episode, but he sort of looks like a predator through this episode, and they sort of kind of call him a little bit like the first time we're going to meet the teacher. She's like, I think I saw you at the funeral, and he's like, yeah, I'm just some weird dude. And it's like, and then he's like, I think they tell him later on, like, maybe you shouldn't be hanging around the school. And like all the other characters, like they seem to dance around it. Like, Quinn, you're being a little weird. There's a little bit much. And it's like, it really does come across like he's like almost grooming this kid. Like there's one scene where they're like out together at night looking at the stars and stuff. And I was like, ooh, this is going in bad directions.
Jordan, it's all sorted out because when someone says, why are you hanging around a school full of children? He replies, I'm not a freak. And that's it. That's the whole explanation. He's like, I'm not a freak. I'm like, it's something a freak would say.
What's even more is that like they, and I know it's like, it's a lot of like just sweeping under the rug. Like, don't worry about it. We're just going to get to the main thing. It's really about him and his emotional journey. But even like his mom, he's just like, when he meets the mom, he's like, yeah, I was a friend of your husband. Anyways, I'm going to spend a lot of time with your son. She's like, checks out with me. I got dishes to do.
Yes. Essentially, over the course of the episode and over everyone's objections, every one of the sliders objects to this. Quinn decides he's going to intervene in the childhood life of himself. As you said, he starts by going to visit his mom and returning the dog they lost. And he's just like, immediately says, I'm your husband's friend, Jim. We used to play chess together. And then gives some very specific insights into her son's grief that are just so weird. And the mom, as you said, Jordan, just like, huh, what a weird thing for you to know of. But okay, okie dokie, that sounds fine.
And let me ask you this. So this is going to be like his emotional journey is basically like Quinn is seeing a very emotional, traumatic point in his life, and he wants to reverse this. And this is a great science fiction thing we've seen before. Like, what if you had the chance to go back and change something about yourself or about decisions you made? I don't think this is the greatest version of that we've seen. I will argue it's a quite bad version of it, but there's an interesting idea there. But I don't know if even at the very end, the way they kind of wrap this up, if there's enough justification for the way he's acting. Like, he's so driven and so over the top and so angry and so focused. And at the end, I'm like, oh, is because of some bullying? Like, it's not like we've seen that it's had a despite what he says, there has been no traumatic events on him, and he doesn't seem like someone who has this baggage. Like, do you think that's fair?
Like, I don't know if it's jumping ahead too much to talk about like the reason why he's doing this so much in terms of like,
I think go for it.
The baseball bat and injuring a kid and giving him a lifelong limp. It might have been a little better if it was a little more extreme and maybe like he like not killed somebody, but maybe caused something a little more serious, a little more life-changing to someone. Then you could maybe really understand that, yeah, like this was something he did that ruined someone's life.
Well, I think the thing is, Jordan, this is something I think you have complained about in the past, something you hate as an episode trope, and this episode leans into it heavily, is that Quinn knows a piece of information that's driving him, but he won't ever tell anyone else out loud until basically the penultimate moment of the episode where he explains the reason he's done all of this. Mm-hmm. He knows it, and he could tell everyone, but he doesn't until the last second. And I think what it is you end up just like watching an episode where a character is really driven to do something, but he won't tell you why. Even though he could, there's no reason he couldn't tell the other sliders that he's upset because at the end of this series of bullying events that he's going to attempt to stop, he did something really bad and he regretted it his whole life. What we're left with the idea is that Quinn's going to, like, they leave it with the idea that's like, oh, did Quinn get really hurt at the end of it? And at the end, he's just like, oh, big reveal, I actually did something bad, and that's what I'm trying to prevent. So what you're watching is you're watching a show where you know there's a twist coming as soon as it starts happening. You know, like, it's not going to be exactly what it looks like. And Quinn knows the outcome, but he just refuses to tell any of his friends why he's doing it. So you're just kind of stuck waiting for him to like get to the point.
I would also argue that the solution he gives is
Well, let's get into the episode because
Okay.
you're right. Because
Yeah.
that's the question of the whole episode is just like, is the solution make any sense? And what it is Quinn starts intervening at school. He starts going there. There's 3 bullying events he's trying to stop. He shows up to the first one and scares all the bullies away to prevent baby Quinn from getting beat up. And I have to say, baby Quinn, the actor's fine, but they say that why Quinn gets bullied is because he was skipped ahead 2 years, so he's 2 years younger than all the kids in his grade, so they all pick on him. But they didn't cast a kid who's 2 years younger than all the other kids.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think he's supposed to be smaller, but he's like, they all kind of look the same. I agree. I'll say one weird thing about this, though, is he has, you're right, they say there's 3 major bullying events, and maybe this is really, really picky, and I don't mean it to be, but like, you would think if you markedly change the outcome of the first one, it would then have a ripple effect and change the other 2, but it doesn't. It's like if there was a fight on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, and the first fight was averted, you would think that Wednesdays would at least change in some ways, but it doesn't because the episode needs it not to, which I just thought was like, eh.
You're thinking too hard about this.
I agree. I think their time travel under rules are very loosey-goosey for sure. Like I said, he stops this first fight, and then, there's a bunch of back and forth, like, where he has to get to know baby Quinn. Like, baby Quinn follows him back to the hotel, and they go back to his house, and, like, they meet the teacher again, and, like, essentially what we're seeing, though, is Quinn becoming a father figure for baby Quinn. They're having heart-to-hearts, and Quinn's just like, I'm going to teach you to defend yourself. I'm going to teach you to fight. And it's so funny. He's like, I'm going to teach you to fight. And over the course of the episode, literally, his friends, the Sliders, his mom, the teacher, they're all objecting. They all object to him teaching this kid to fight. But Quinn's like, I'm doing it. I'm teaching this kid to fight.
Yeah. Did we mention the teacher's hot?
At the second bullying event that happens, Quinn's going to go stop that one too. But this time Arturo intervenes and stops him. And, Quinn kind of lays out why he's doing this. Except for like the big twist at the end involving the baseball. He's just like, I got bullied 3 times and it really messed me up and I need to stop it. And it's just like constantly back and forth of him like arguing for why he needs to teach himself to fight, but not telling anyone why. Like everyone's always asking him, it's like, why are you doing this? It seems extreme. And he will never explain to them the purpose or the thing that happened to him, right? Blah, blah, blah. He bumps into the teacher and he tells the teacher outside the school after she's like, stop hanging out here. It's weird. And he's like, I'm not a freak. He's like, why don't we go get dinner together? He invites his teacher to dinner. The entire dinner is him talking about baby Quinn and like including details of baby Quinn's future that he couldn't possibly know. And the teacher's never she's off put, but she's for some reason always charmed by this insane man she's on a date with.
That's what I like about these sorts of shows. And again, it's funny to make these sort of nitpicky notes on a science fiction show where they're sliding to different universes. But there's something funny about there's this date and he is saying nothing charming. If anything, he's being weird and kind of creepy, but she's into it because they just have to. They just have to have her be charmed by him. But there's nothing that the audience has seen other than maybe he's attractive, that why she would be into him. She'd be like, you talked about this kid a lot.
Yeah. At some point, he's just like, I had a teacher just like you when I was a kid, and she was hot. And she's like, oh, well, thank you very much. And then he goes back and he's just like, hey, listen, I'm going to be going soon, and I need you to protect baby Quinn while I'm gone. And she's like, what? And he's like, well, let's make out now. And so they do. Anyway, there's a bit of a sequence, a montage kind of sequence where he teaches baby Quinn to fight and like it's going on. And then they go, you mentioned this, Jordan, they go hang out staring up at the sky at night at the stars. And Quinn literally gives a speech about how we're all stardust. And I was just like, oh my God.
Yeah, it's bad. Don't you think that scene would have been better, though, if it had Joe Cocker sing You Are So Beautiful over top of it?
This episode, I think your ability to enjoy it really depends on how much melodrama you can stand. Because essentially this episode is just a melodrama turned up to 11. Like, it's just heavy melodrama.
I think you make a very interesting point because I'll say this, like, I hated this episode. And I think maybe more so than both of you, but you might be right. It might be how much you can take this sort of stuff. And I just thought this was so maudlin and so dumb. And I just didn't care that he was going to save himself because I just didn't think it was worth saving. And it's like, who cares about any of this?
Well, and I know from a fact, having looked up some stuff around this episode, this is a very popular fan favorite episode. Like, I think some people find the melodrama very exciting, and it's a classic in some ways. Just thinking about your youth and the things that went wrong and how you'd like to fix them. Like you said, like this is a classic trope. And I really think it depends on how much melodrama you enjoy, because it really is just like that's what they're offering you here. And so if that bothers you, oh man, you're going to be bothered.
Well, let me ask you this. I mean, you guys have seen a lot more episodes of this than I have, or at least a few more. Do you know if this episode is kind of unique in its setup and the fact that it's kind of character-based versus, like, adventure? There's no kind of greater adventure or danger to the group.
No, there have definitely been character-based low adventure episodes intermixed with it. There's none of them have been this dramatic, I don't think. None of them have been like this character-driven piece was the core of this. The closest we got that comes to mind is there was a B-plot where Arturo gets to meet the wife who died on his planet. On his Earth, he had a wife who died young, and on this new Earth, she's still alive. And that was a dramatic character-driven B-plot, but it wasn't the A-plot. This is the first time maybe it's been an A-plot.
See, but I thought that was more effective. I think, at least for B, that idea is a more effective nostalgic thing of a lost love, what could have been, as opposed to this, which is, I wish I had beaten up some kids, but maybe not so bad. It's like, give me a break.
Well, I guess that's the difference. Is Jordan, you're a real romantic at heart, so a lost love thing is big for you. And a kid getting revenge on his bullies, you hate because you were the bully.
I wasn't the bully. But I did laugh. And this is, it's not actually funny, but it's interesting to see such a timestamp because you would not see this in TV before.
I know what you're going to say.
Yeah, and Dave, you know what it is. They're bullying the kid. They're bullying Quinn, and they call him queer.
Yeah, they say, nice move, queer.
Yeah, and I was just like, oh my gosh,
whoa.
That's crazy to hear that in TV, but it was just so commonplace, right? And we're all the same age. Like that would have been what you would have heard on the playground. So that was accurate, but it seems sort of shocking now in 2023.
That's true. It did seem like I'm like, whoa, don't really hear that on TV anymore.
Yeah.
At any rate, after kind of Quinn has trained his younger self to stand up to his bullies, he's taught him to fight, they've had a real heart-to-heart, all of the Sliders gather at the school to watch Baby Quinn's third climactic fight. All of the Sliders show up to watch it.
It's been a boring week just watching like Arturo watch a football game.
And of course, this is where the big reveal is. They don't know why Quinn has been so insistent that he stop these bullies from bullying his younger self. And in this scene, what we see is Baby Quinn steps out from behind a tree. He's carrying a baseball bat, but he doesn't use it. He uses it to threaten the bullies, but then he drops it, and he proceeds to beat the bullies into unconsciousness with his fists. And it's at this point, Quinn turns to all his friends and says, "You see, when I was a boy, I crippled a lad with a baseball bat, but in this world, I've only beaten them with my fists into unconsciousness. So hence, my trauma is relieved." And I was just like, great. So like, weapons violence bad, fist violence good is the lesson of this episode.
Yeah, I just thought it was so nuts. Like, I know what they're going for, which is, you know, he still needed to stand up for himself and find that inner strength. But it's like, it wouldn't have been that much of a twist to just being like, what you really needed to do was just walk away from a situation or use your words, or there's another way to have a better resolution to this sort of fight. But they're just like, well, giving a concussion is better than breaking a kid's kneecaps.
I also was watching it being like, this is a real indictment of the school system, that they're like, they know this bullying. The teachers are all aware this bullying is happening, and they literally do nothing about it.
Yeah. Now, if he really wanted him to defend himself, shouldn't he just given him a gun?
Here's the thing, Jordan, is I knew this twist was coming. I just knew it was going to be a thing where Quinn went too far. I knew that was what the twist was going to be. And the entire time I'm like, all I could think was Quinn's a school shooter.
Yeah. Well, that's what and I think this kind of, I might be wrong, but I think this sort of predates Columbine and this sort of wave of those school shootings. Not that there wasn't school shootings before, but the sort of like the first of sort of national attention for those sorts of things. But it does feel like, through all this weird grooming and stuff, that if it's not a like weird sexual thing, that it is going to be a thing where like he shot someone and he's trying to avoid that. Like, it was just weird. And again, the resolution was like, I don't think any of this justifies how we've seen him act, nor does it seem like a worthwhile endeavor to have spent this effort to still have him act in a violent manner as a way to, solve a problem.
Yeah, I think, and I don't know, maybe it's just the passage of time and how we view these things, but watching it, I'm just like, the lesson here is still very bad. Yeah.
It's just like, I don't know. It just is so dumb. But I do like, because once we get this, it's like everyone's like, oh, Quinn, you're great. But then he has to have this last little button with the teacher.
Well, this is it. Now that he's saved Quinn's life, he goes and says goodbye to his mom. He goes and says goodbye to baby Quinn. And, he says goodbye to the teacher who's in love with him now. And he leaves them to go slide. And as they're all jumping into the slide hole to leave, the teacher's like, changes her mind. She's like, I can't let Jim leave. I love him too much. So he runs around the corner and catches Quinn standing in front of a slide hole. And Quinn looks at her and says, you've been making out with one of your students all along. I'm Quinn. And then he jumps into the slide hole. And I was like, and she's left there with a look on her face. I think the look is supposed to be like she's shocked by the slide hole. But to me, I'm like, she is shocked to hear what a nightmare has happened to her.
You've wrecked her life.
Yeah, I was thinking about, does this woman end up in an asylum? Because if she tells anybody about what happened, like, that's it. Like, no one would ever believe her. And then, does she even believe it?
How does she teach little Quinn now? Knowing that he's going to grow up to be such a little hottie.
Well, she's going to keep a close eye on him.
She definitely is transferring schools, and Quinn's on his own from this point forward.
I wrote a note, and I was really hoping that just like the last episode, this would keep going, and they were going to go to another world, and then she was going to come into the portal, but she'd be pregnant. And they'd be like, Quinn.
I will say, coming off of the last episode, which is an episode in which Quinn's double doesn't reveal that they're twinsies, and then starts a relationship with him, and Quinn is essentially hurt and like disturbed by that information when it's received by him. And then the next episode we watch, Quinn does the exact same thing to another woman.
Yeah. Well, it's also
the exact same betrayal.
It's not only that, it's the wanton disregard for their own rules of like not affecting things, which they have said earlier on, but now it's like, well, if she's cute, it's fine. Or if the person's got a penthouse, it's fine. Or if you want to be rich, it's fine. Or whatever. So it's just like, well, no, it's whatever you feel like. Who cares what happens in
I
these
was also
worlds?
just like, in season 3, they've just, any rules, they're like, fuck it, who cares?
Yeah. Well, you know why, Luke? They can land within 400 miles of anywhere.
All right, you guys. Well, that pretty much wraps up those 2 episodes. I don't know, were there any final notes we didn't cover in either of those episodes that you still wanted to talk about?
Well, the only thing I had is that I think they should have cast like a chubbier kid as young Quinn, because Jerry O'Connell was like a chubby kid. I think that would have been a funny callback.
Oh, that would have been good if they had grabbed like a Stand By Me style kid. That would have been nice. I think that would have been nice for the audience. All right. Well, why don't we get into ratings then? Dave, I'm not sure if you remember, but we rate things out of 10 stars, sort of IMDb style rules. Of course, you can rate them as you see fit, like critically by your level of enjoyment. Sometimes things can be bad but enjoyable, so it's really up to you. But out of a possible 10, how do you feel about the first episode, Double Cross?
I actually kind of didn't love it, and believe it or not, I like the second episode more.
I think that's fair. I think to Luke's point, it is probably that you like that sort of thing more than I do.
I'd go for a 6 for the first one.
6, very good. I'll go next, I guess. This episode was a cartoon. It felt like a cartoon. The villains were so evil. Everything that was happening was so goofy. But in some ways, I think it might be the best episode of Sliders I've seen.
Oh
like,
my gosh.
It was
Oh dear.
wild and stupid, and like everything that was happening was like the dumbest thing possible. But honestly, every Sliders episode has been so bad up till now, and I was like, oh, this is the best it's ever been. It should just be this. It should be a live action cartoon, because it at least is like insane. That's something. I do think that all the stuff about Quinn and his double making out, and that like Arturo is having an affair with Quinn's double. The show's writers have a real weird sexual thing going on. Both of these episodes, like they're some very weird stuff that they need to deal with in therapy, I think. But I will say, it was at least so crazy I had a nice time. I'm going to go 6.5.
Okay, I had a very different experience than you guys. I'll say this. Here's my one thing I'll say. It wasn't boring, but it's so dumb. It's so dumb, I can't get over it. So I broke this down into the 2 plot lines. So the A plot, I give it a 2.5 out of 5. And then the B plot, which is the worst one we've seen, I give it a 1 out of 5. So that gives it a 3.5 out of 10.
Are you guys rating these on a sliding scale? As in like, it's a 10 for this show. This is as good as this show gets. That's a 10. Or is it just kind of a general rating?
I'm rating this out of 45 minutes of my life I'm never getting back.
I think, to your question, Dave, is more of a general rating compared to like everything we've watched and how much we enjoy them. But in Sliders' particular case, we quite enjoyed the pilot. I think it got very high ratings. So in some ways, each episode is now having to live up to like the promise of that pilot. So I think what we're seeing is like, and I'm trying to be generous. Like I said, I think that episode was a crazy dumb cartoon episode, but at least it wasn't boring and it was fun for that reason. And I think it's the most fun I've had watching an episode of Sliders. So I'm crediting it for that with that 6.5. So
Quality's been sliding.
Nice.
the quality started at the bottom. It hasn't. It's sliding upward, if anything.
It's laddering.
All right, Dave, The Guardian, out of 10. What do you think?
The Guardian, I don't know, guys. This episode, I wouldn't say it got to me. That's ridiculous. But it got to me more than the other one, which didn't really have any character stuff. So I'm going to give this one a 6.5. That's a C. That's a solid C.
6.5. Yeah, I think that's the thing. I think this episode is entirely based on how much melodrama. Because I think, it's not the best episode of the show. It's not the worst episode of the show. I thought it was very funny that they time traveled. Finally, it finally happened. I saw the twist coming a mile away. Does the lesson make any sense? Absolutely not. I don't know. I feel indifferent to it in a lot of ways, but it's still not. I'm going to go 4.5.
I'm going to give 2 points for the hot teacher and nothing for anything else because I hated this episode and everything about it. So 2 out of 10.
2 out of 10.
2 out of 10 for her name was, the character's name was Heather Hanley, Miss Hanley. She gets 2 points. Terrible episode. I hated it.
I guess you hated it slightly more than the last episode.
I hated it slightly more than I did actually, but because it just was an episode of like, who cares that they were in another dimension? It didn't matter. There was no sliding, nothing. It's just him walking around grooming himself. It was creepy. I hated it.
Jordan, you go back in time. You meet your younger self. What are you gonna do?
I'm not gonna spend it looking at the stars with myself and teaching myself boxing. I'm gonna give myself that betting almanac that Marty McFly has around and make myself rich.
I bet you what you do is you go back, you just bully yourself.
Oh, come on now.
All right. Now, Dave, you don't know this, but Jordan does. We are reaching some pretty critical points with the ratings of Sliders here. So I think we're probably going to need to check the old continued red computer to see if we're taking the escape pod on Sliders.
Yes, we'll have to boot up the computer. Here's it's going. It's going now.
So with these last 2 ratings, which I think were middling, but Jordan, you certainly disliked them quite a bit, so drop them down, not an insignificant amount. Let's see how we're doing. What would you bet, Jordan? You think we're going to escape pod?
I don't know.
You see, whatever's coming next is going to be worse than this, though. You know that.
It is true. We do know it only goes downhill.
Who knows? Maybe we're going to love the Cro-Mags.
We can't... Could we possibly dislike it more than what we're watching now? It's hard to say.
Unless there's an episode where he goes back and like grooms a Cro-Mag at a young age. I'm not going to hate it more than this episode.
The 4th season is the grooming season. That's well known.
All right. The current rating, Jordan and Dave, is 5.18.
Oh, we're still watching it. Just over that cusp. We're at a nice.
That's because of me. That's because of me.
That's because you, Dave. Because you love this maudlin episode.
Well, Jordan, I do have some good news for you, though.
Yeah.
We are at the halfway point of Sliders, so we're going to take a little break from Sliders. We've watched halfway through season 3. I think it's probably about 10 or so episodes, maybe a little more, maybe a little less. Mm-hmm. We're going to go watch a couple other series, take a breather, reset ourselves on Sliders, and then come back later this year to finish it off. So there is going to be a slight pause in our Sliders coverage as we go off and watch some other things and get our brains out of this world of Sliders.
And it will be interesting to see when we come back if we're going to feel differently about it. Sometimes like a little time goes on, but we both came back to Tech War and we were like, yeah, Tech War.
That's true. You never know. We might be more fond of it when we return. Mm-hmm. It's been a rough go for the first half of Sliders, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Do you guys know who leaves the show kind of by the end? Does everybody major leave the show?
I don't know. My understanding is everyone but Rembrandt will leave at some point. Rembrandt, I think, is the only one in all episodes.
Jerry O'Connell's pursuing his film career.
Yeah, it's going to start getting messy, I think.
But maybe that'll be fun. We'll find out.
Maybe.
Dave, thank you for coming on for this episode of Sliders. We really appreciate it. I'm glad to have you here. You gave a new perspective on it and really gave us a slightly different ratings than we might have otherwise had.
Mm-hmm.
You've saved Sliders.
You're welcome.
Put that on your business card. The man who saved Sliders.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming on again. It was a lot of fun.
You're very welcome.
And you, listener at home, as we've said, we're halfway through season 3 and we're going to take a break. And maybe you can't wait for us to come back. Maybe you need more sliders. Well, we've got bonus episodes for charity. So we've got a list of charities on our website. Continuumdrag.podbean.com is our website. And of course, on social media, you can follow the links in our bios to get to it too. But you can make a donation to a charity as selected by our past guests and pick an episode from a show that we've either skipped that episode because we're doing a best of run like Sliders, or perhaps we've used the escape pod in another show. Maybe you want us to go back and watch an episode of Man and Machine that we didn't watch. That's up to you.
Man and Machine.
Make a donation to charity, send us the receipt, tell us which episode you want to watch, and we will do a bonus episode for charity. All the details are on the website. Go check it out there. We've got some suggested donation levels, etc., etc., etc. And if you still have some questions, feel free to email us here. Continuumdrag@gmail.com is that address, and we can fill you in on all the details. In the meantime, we're going to have clips from these 2 episodes of Sliders. You can find that on our social media, @ContinuumDrags, the handle, and it's on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. I can tell you right now, I think there's only a single clip from the second episode where Quinn meets his younger self, because it's not a very exciting episode for clips.
Yeah, I guess there's not much like instantly biteable sort of things, is there?
Yeah, it's a very drama-driven one. So most of them are from the crazy, wacky cartoon adventures.
Do you think when people are sending you these charity receipts, do you think you could be using those as like tax write-offs for yourselves?
Oh, that's true, Dave. You make a very good point.
Is that possible?
Get yourself a little treat with a tax write-off.
Just a thought.
And get a bonus episode. Dave, come back next week and give us more tips on how to sell these charity episodes.
Will do.
Don't get Dave started on the tax man.
Well, that about wraps it up for this week. So, listener, thank you for joining us. And Jordan, I'll see you next week.
I'll see you then.
Continuum Drag is recorded in Toronto, Ontario, and Seoul, South Korea. Theme music by James Rick Seidler. Produced by Jordan Delick and Luke Black. Special thanks to Aaron Yunes.